Hey, this is Notser, and this is a look at the early tier Japanese battleships. The Mikasa, premium tier 2 Japanese battleship. Probably more for historical purposes that this exists in the game, not actually fun and interesting gameplay. Let's face it, it's the only tier 2 battleship in the game. It has very low armor. Its bow and stern can be overmatched by every single battleship it faces, and you will see this is a trend for the early tier Japanese battleships. It has 4 305mm guns in 2 turrets, no AA protection whatsoever. Its secondary guns are okay, actually, and funny enough, oh, there's the dispersion example, pinpoint accurate, and the other gun completely off the chart in its dispersion. That's what it feels like controlling the Mikasa. But most players I have found, if they have the Mikasa, they will convert it to a secondary ship. You can't get the module for secondary gun range, but you can use advanced firing training, also the flag, and they bring in a high skill commander since it's premium, and they have fun that way. Overall, the ship is intriguing, unique. It's not something I would go out and legitimately play for competitive purposes. It's historical in nature. It's very unique in the game itself. Only battleship at tier 2. Just try to have fun with it and do whatever you would like with it if you have it in your inventory. And if you find it, just shoot with AP as a battleship. For the tier 3, we have the Kawachi. Now, this is the first official Japanese battleship that you will most likely run across. It has 12 305mm guns in 6 turrets. Now, 2 of the turrets at any given moment can't be accessed because they're stuck fixed on the port or starboard side. Again, the armor, it can be overmatched on the bow and the stern by every single battleship it faces. That is a big, big weakness that everyone should take advantage of. Here's an example of me going up against a Wakataki, and I really do feel like if you are committed to firing on a destroyer or a low armored cruiser at low tier, use HE in these 305s. It's actually pretty good. If you consider the AP will do probably like 8,500. Let's just say 8,500 is the AP damage. Overpin is 10% of that, so 850 damage. If the HE, it's somewhere in the realm of 52 or 5,700. If we're going to take that and do a third, which that's what either HE does damage, which is a third, or it shatters. Now, you could potentially get the Citadel, but this is more about targeting ships where you're going to overpin. So Citadel is kind of irrelevant in that manner. You can get the Citadel, but the HE is going to do probably 1,400 to 1,600 damage. That's almost double on average than the AP overpin. So if you know you're going to overpin, just sling that HE. Use AP against battleships and heavily armored cruisers like the St. Louis. You can trick them sometimes and use your opposite side, port or starboard guns, which is unique to the Kawachi, and now it's not really a good thing to be unique about, but it's a part of the ship. Next up, we've got the Tier 4 Japanese battleship, Myogi. It has 6 356mm guns. We're starting to see the trait, larger on average gun caliber, and it's pretty nimble, good range, especially for its tier. However, the bow and the stern armor, again, can be overmatched by every single battleship it faces, so just shoot AP at this sucker. You want to stay at range. The rudder is okay, the AA protection is okay, not anything that I would be impressed by at all. Its length of the ship is actually very long compared to most of its counterparts. They've got much more shorter, fatter, thick. So you're going to take a long time to turn. Your radius is much larger. You got to deal with it. However, it does get you ready for the future. Now, for this particular ship, the gun layout is much different from pretty much everything else that you're going to use. Its primary armament is facing the rear. So, in general, you want to be moving away, angled, whenever you're using this particular ship. That is where you're going to be doing most of your damage. But having 356 at tier 4, you do pretty good damage. And I find that I have success in it probably more than the average, but it is much more similar to what you're about to get your hands on. Tier 5, Tier 6, Tier 7, Tier 8. long ships with larger than average caliber gun. The armor does go up after the Kongo, but the early tier Japanese, if you're shooting at these guys, take advantage of the low armored bow and stern. That's all I gotta say. HE, low chance of shatter on those bow and stern parts. AP, if you're a battleship, it doesn't matter the angle. But, you know, in general, it works out. Now, here's another tier 4. This is the premium tier 4, Ishizuchi. Recently got a buff. It's got 10 305mm guns at a range of 15.3 kilometers. Very low AA protection. Very fast battleship, very long. Again, the weakness, bow and stern. Not enough armor to stop battleship AP. That's the weak point of these guys. Plus, of course, you've got a citadel on the broadside. It's pretty much standard fare for the Japanese, and here's an example of the Ishizuchi. It's actually a pretty fun ship to play now after the buffs. So we're going after the St. Louis 305. That's a familiar caliber, of course. I actually choose to use AP in this scenario, and this is when you should have used AP before, Notser. It is a heavily armored cruiser. The AP will actually get stuck on the ship. It'll do pretty good damage, right? Yeah. And it is somewhat like a Kongo in its appearance, like an early Kongo. If you've seen the Kongo with the stock hull, it really does remind me of it. I love the camo. Camo looks very good, and the guns are mostly useful. 4 of the 5 gun turrets have great angles. That middle gun turret you will have to deal with, but 4 of the 5, great angles to engage the target and not risk the ship that much. The Ishizuchi is actually surprisingly effective now after the range buff. Whenever they did the stealth fire nerf to the game, they gave it more range because its detection outranged the gun in the old version. But now it's pretty good. Its caliber you don't really notice. Now you could get up tiered into tier 6, and then you're starting to see much higher armor values. But if you're going equal tier, maybe tier 5, you don't really notice the low caliber. Speaking of tier 5s, this is the Kongo, the fast battleship. 8 356mm guns, pretty good AA protection, very quick, terrible concealment, but absolutely insane gun range. And again, the bow and the stern armor are terrible. Every single battleship, plus or minus, that it will face can overmatch it. It's just one of the weak points of the Japanese battleship early on. But the Kongo can engage most of the map, as you can see. That's not a normal trait. 21 kilometer gun range is not normal for tier 5, and it wasn't normal back in the day. It used to be a much larger gap compared to the competition. The American battleships really suffered in this. The Japanese battleships could just engage at 2, 3, 4 kilometers outside of the maximum range that the Americans had. Of course, Wargaming, they've adjusted that, they've fixed that, they've made it much closer with recent changes. However, the Kongo is still the Kongo. Fast, great guns, great range. It is a force to be reckoned with if you're a cruiser. If you're a destroyer, try and out-rotate those turrets. They have terrible traverse. You want to pick up expert marksman as soon as possible on the Kongo. But if you've got the target in sights, you should be able to do as much damage as necessary to kill it. I always like getting to the objective quickly, killing off the fast cruisers, forcing the enemy team to have to fight down a couple ships. At that point, you just need to trade 1-to-1, and your team should win outright pretty much 80 or 90% of the time, because it's really hard to make up 1 or 2 ships after an early start that the Kongo is so great at because of its speed and because of its range. It can just impact the game right at the get-go. So that's been the early tier Japanese battleships, long range, fast battleships with pretty impressive gun calibers for their tier, very weak bow and stern armor. AA's okay, turret traverse is okay. Look forward to exploring the late tier Japanese battleships. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.